So welcome everybody to our Kingston University virtual open day for our geography programme. And essentially we're running this virtual open day for people who maybe can't come to any of our real open days. So my name is Mary Kelly and I'm the course director for the geography programme here at Kingston. And these are my two colleagues, Debbie Humphrey and Stuart Downward, and I'll let them introduce themselves to you.
Okay, so I'm Debbie Humphrey, I'm a human geography lecturer. I teach across all 3 years of the geography degree, from topics that may be very relevant, such as looking at migration and housing, and then at sort of global issues such as agriculture, global rural geography, and global labour relations. And we do lots of field trips, and we also do lots of, students do lots of research, and I teach research methods as well.
I'm Stuart Downward, I'm a physical geographer, and my area of expertise is in water and river management, but I teach across a lot of the physical geography modules in geomorphology, in coastal dynamics, coastal change, climate change, which is a major issue you'll investigate over your time with us here at Kingston.
Okay, great. So while we're waiting for some questions, I'm going to give you guys a overview about the things that I think are important about our BSc in Geography. So we are offering a BSc in Geography. It's a three-year course full-time or 6 years part-time, and there's also the opportunity for you to study abroad, so that would make it 4 years. The things that are important about our specific BSc in Geography is that our course has been accredited by the Royal Geographical Society. And what this is a picture here of the Royal Geographical Society. It's in London. And what is important about that, or why that is relevant, is that essentially they look at our courses and they evaluate how well we're doing in terms of the geography, the geographical information that we are delivering. Is it in line with what they think is appropriate? And secondly, we have to think about employability. And most students are coming to university to think about their future careers and what you're going to do in your life. So what we have to do is to think about how we not only teach you about geography and geographical knowledge and theory, but to also prepare you for the workplace. And what that means is developing transferable skills or generic skills that employers might need, like project management, critical thinking, problem solving, and those kind of things which are required by employers but are not geography specific. So essentially our BSc in Geography is a mixture of geographical information, we're studying geographical issues, but we're also thinking about employability. So that's really important, and I'll speak a little bit more about employability in a couple of minutes. Just in general about who we are, these are some general demographics about our students. We have slightly more females than males. Most of our students went to state schools rather than private schools. Most of our students are the typical undergraduate age group of between under 20 or between 20 and 24. We do have some older students who are considered mature but are still in their 20s, and then we do have a small cohort of mature students. So we have a nice mix of people in terms of our student body. And then we also have a lot of students from the United Kingdom. Most of our students do come from the UK, but we also have international students. And it's really useful to have students from lots of different backgrounds, because as geographers we're interested in people and places, and different students from different backgrounds bring their own particular perspectives to the things that we study, and that's really important, so we're quite proud about that. We've also been considered the University of the Year for widening participation, and essentially what that means is that traditionally only certain cohorts of people went to university. White people, middle class people. Traditionally, of course, it was just men that went to university. And now we include people, or we encourage people from lots of different backgrounds to avail of a third level education. Another really, I suppose, important thing about us is that we are very close to central London, and that provides us with lots of useful opportunities for field trips. So we take our students to look at cultural issues in Brixton, for example. We go to the mayor's office. Debbie, maybe you want to elaborate a little bit on where you bring your students?
So one of the things we do, we look at regeneration, and we take students to Elephant and Castle, and what we do is they go to a developer's office And the developer talks about, who they're selling the properties to, people walk around the properties, kind of understand the financial economic side of it. But then we talk to an activist, which is a resident from Elephant and Castle, whose family is actually being displaced due to regeneration. And then he takes us around and then he gives us his view on the area and the businesses that are threatened, and people's homes that are threatened, and also about what is being done to kind of fight that and contest that. So basically what we're doing at this level is we're giving students different perspectives on a topic. So it's not like, here's the topic, this is what it means. It's like you understand that different people have different experiences of the same sort of geographical situation, and have contestations around certain issues. So students are encouraged to kind of think around it from different perspectives. So that's a kind of example of how we might approach a field trip.
I don't know, Stuart, have you got any examples that you can?
Yeah. I mean, as a physical geographer, we often think of wild rural places that we go to, mountains and wild rivers and glaciers, etc. And we do that, but of course, London also provides us a great opportunity. The Thames, for example, is a central defining feature of central London. And we'll take a field trip along the River Thames. We'll look at how the Thames and the Thames development has been integral to London's development, and how that relationship between the physical geographical setting and the resources that provides for people through London's historical context and development. So yeah, we can use our local environment really well. But also to point out that our position on the outskirts of London means that we've also got ready access to the rural environment. So half an hour in the other direction, I can be on the North Downs, and I can be in these wonderful physical landscapes up there.
Okay, great. So these are things that we think are important, or give us, make us, I guess, special as a university. Our location and our student body, they're really important. Essentially, you guys probably are all interested in geography, and this graph shows employability across different disciplines. This is for across the United Kingdom, not just Kingston University. But what you can see here, this is the percentage of students largely who are unemployed 6 months after they have graduated. And what we can see here in the green line is the geographers, and we can see that that's actually lower than some other subjects. And usually on a real virtual open day, I ask people to think about, maybe you want to think about, well, why is that? What makes geographers so employable? And actually one of the key things, reasons, I guess, is because geography is such a diverse discipline. We study the human world, we study the physical world, we study culture, we study politics, we study environment, we study demographics. So essentially we look at all issues, or all aspects of our world. And that means the kinds of things that our students do are very broad, and that they tend to be highly employable as a result of the skills that they have developed from their degree. This is just to give you an example of some of the things that our students have done. I've taken a page from LinkedIn. I don't know if you're familiar with LinkedIn. It's kind of like Facebook for work, professional an online forum through which professionals advertise themselves and look for jobs. This is an example. We can see what some of our students are doing. So some students are working for the United Nations, some people are working for the Earth observation, some students go on to do teaching, and actually quite a few of our students go on to do teaching. Some of our students go on to do postgraduate work in sustainability or development, and then some of our students go on to do work in GIS, or geographical information systems, and essentially that means mapping different kinds of data. So our graduates tend to be highly employable, and that's I guess relevant both to us as an institution, but also relevant to geography as a discipline. So again, I guess most of you guys who are at home listening already know that geography is a really important discipline. We think, why is it so important in our society? And I guess one of the key things is about the interface between the human and the physical world. And when we think about any issue in our society, problematic issue, climate change, for example, we know that that is a physical process and something we must understand the science of. But we also know that it's a human process in the sense that it is caused by humans, if we think about anthropogenic climate change or anthropogenic factors. And of course, it also has impacts on people because we are now experiencing droughts and flooding and are being impacted. Communities are being impacted as a result of the changes in climate. And so the important thing is that we think about not just the science, but also the relationship between people and that process. And even if we look at any issue in our society, we can think about the ways in which people interact with the environment or shape our relationship with that particular issue. So we can think about climate change, we can think about pollution, it's physical and it's human. We can think about sustainability, it's physical and it's human. And we can think about issues about the hazards and how they are both physical and human. And we need to understand how the systems work so that we can better deal with the issues. So in our department we have a range of specialists. Some of us are geographers, some of us are environmental scientists, some of us are geologists, some of us are ecologists. And essentially when you are being taught by whatever member of staff, you'll be taught by that person who is an expert in the particular field, because geography is so broad and you do need specialist knowledge. I guess what's also really important about geography is when we think about, we're not just thinking about human natural interfaces or human physical interfaces, we're also thinking about the relationships between people and relationships between places. So when we think about the Middle Eastern refugee crisis, we know that that's not just a Middle Eastern problem, it's also a European problem and a wider global problem. And indeed, if we were to look at it historically, we could think about the impacts of colonialism and how people and places have been shaped by people from other places in the past, and what the impacts of that is. So geography is really important for thinking about relationships between the human world and the physical world, but also the relationships between places. So I guess that's why we're all here as geographers, looking at what is going on in our society or on our planet, and how we can understand that with a view to implementing change or trying to solve some of the issues that we face today. Okay, so in relation to that, or drawing on from that, we can also think about skills that we learn as geographers, and GIS, Geographical Information Systems, is a really important skill that we will teach you at all levels here at Kingston. Mapping is really important, because if we're looking at problems, it's really important for us to understand where problems are. If we know where they are, then we can understand, or we can explore the issues that cause them or the impacts in those particular areas, and we can better understand the nature of these problems and the solutions to them. This is a map that shows a flood reoccurrence in Europe. So if we're interested in flooding, we need to know the places that are most likely to be flooded, so we can deal with those issues in advance and become resilient. Essentially, we could map any kind of data. We can map populations, we can map fashion, we can map pollen counts, we can map distribution of bees, and that's really important, so we know the distribution of places. And actually that's one of the really important things for geographers, because we know where things are, and it means that we can address, or it gives us a starting point from which we can start to address those issues. So GIS is an important element of our teaching. In addition to this, one of the key things maybe why we're different, or the emphasis in terms of our teaching delivery, is that there's a strong emphasis on teaching and the applied nature of geography. So we're not just giving you a textbook and getting you to read the stuff and to tell it to us back, but we're asking you to go out into the field and do real life learning. And some examples of the things that we can do. So here we can see people in the field. Examples of things that we do with our students. So one example is we bring secondary school children in, and we get our undergraduates to teach geography to the secondary school children. And in that fashion, our students are relearning both their geography, their geographical skills, and there also has the opportunity to manage a classroom, see what it feels like to be a teacher, so that they can have a better understanding about the ways in which we can apply geography, or how geography is applied. Another example is we went to Swansea on a field trip, and we asked the students to produce a heritage trail of different areas in Swansea. This is an example of what one group of students did. They identified the maritime heritage of the area. They identified key spots where people might like to go. They investigated the history and the relevance of those places. And then they produced a map and a guide that could be used for tourists who are visiting Swansea. So again, it's thinking about what students might do for employment and how we can use geographical knowledge, because essentially it is geographical knowledge in the sense that it's a map. So this is what we think about when we're thinking about how to embed employability into our classes. I don't know if any of you guys have anything to add about real-world learning?
I think it's absolutely important that we think about employability, isn't it? And we think about, you know, where you guys are going to be when you graduate. And so preparing you for the real world, real world learning is so important. And that's right across the course. And so we talk about authentic assessments very often. That's to say that the assessments that you will do will be real world example assessments. You know, we'll work with practitioners where possible, particularly on field work. And we'll develop that whole portfolio of skills. It's not just about the geographical knowledge skills, but about, you know, real world skills of communicating, of writing, of using media sources, of exploring different types of data, etc., numeracy skills. So yeah, absolutely important that we think about employability and we blend the learning closely with that.
And I suppose I'd just add one thing. We actually did a research project where we interviewed students and partners that were involved in projects where students worked with the real world, if you like. So, for example, they worked with community groups, in partners outside of university. And when we interviewed the students really enjoyed doing those modules. Like, they really engaged with them because they felt like it made meaning out of what they were doing. They weren't just learning something like they do at school, but they were actually doing stuff that then might be used by community groups in the world. And yeah, they got really excited by it, and also their grades generally do really well on those projects as well.
Okay, great. So speaking, so the applied nature of the discipline. I guess what's also good is our student satisfaction, the things that our students say about us. So you guys are probably familiar with the student satisfaction across different institutions. The things that our students have said about us at different points over the course of the National Student Survey is that I think it's really important. The course has helped me to present myself with confidence. And actually that's really important because soft skills now are almost equally important as hard skills. So your soft skills are things like your interpersonal relationships, your communication skills, your willingness to take on challenging tasks. And they're the kind of things that employers look for. So confidence is really important. Students said that staff are good at explaining things, that we are enthusiastic about teaching our discipline. And this year actually we were delighted that the BSc in Geography students said they were 100% of people said that they were overall satisfied with the quality of the course. So that's really important to us, that we get good feedback from our students, and if it's the case that students give us feedback about areas that we need to improve, we take those issues on board. So I suppose the good things about geography, of course, is always the fieldwork and the things that we do on fieldwork. And we think about fieldwork as a place to do real-world learning, and that's really exciting and useful. But it's also about thinking about how we can contribute back to communities and how we can use our skills or use our abilities to, work with groups maybe that are disadvantaged. This is an example of some activities that our students did when they went on a field trip to South Africa. So essentially the students went to the townships in South Africa, and there was a real problem with waste pollution, litter and things lying around and making the place, I suppose, generally unsightly and unhealthy. And they worked with a local community organisation in a school, and they developed an initiative to try to get people involved in recycling rather than throwing things away. So they worked with kids and they had a competition about recycling. And one of our, so we said that's of benefit to the community. And then one of our colleagues has a relationship with the Fulham Football Club, and they donated kits and footballs and stuff for the community so that we could kind of give back to those particular communities. So we do like to instill in our geographers, and you guys who are already young geographers probably already have this, but an ability to think about how we can improve the nature of our society, whether it's here in the UK or whether it is in further afield. We know there are lots of challenges for lots of people across different parts of the world. Of course, we also, as we just mentioned, also go to London, and this is another one of Debbie's field trips where we looked at issues about regeneration. Any of you guys may be able to identify the familiar landmark. This is the Olympic Park, and again we looked about issues about regeneration and what was the significance of the Olympics for people who live within that community. We know that lots of money was spent on the Olympics, and we know that there was development as a result, and we look at who benefited from those issues of development. So we have we have fun on field trips, but we also think about, what are the real issues in our society, and how equal or unequal is our society, and what do we need to do to try to deal with that issue. Okay, so I think I've said enough. I don't know if you guys want to add anything that I haven't mentioned.
Well, we've got loads of questions that have come through from various people who've been tuning in, which is fantastic. So please keep them coming. If you've got, I'll just take a few here, and maybe we can answer some of these. So I've got one here from Jade, and Jade asks, "Is the program difficult?"
Is the program difficult? In general, I would say that the program, sorry, I'm tagging the question. Is the program difficult? I would say in general, it's not difficult. I find that students, what I find actually from students is sometimes in first year, the hardest thing isn't really the geographical knowledge or the learning or the course material, but it's getting to grips with the logistics of being at university. So for some of you guys, it'll be your first time living away from home, and that means that you're living independently. You have to get yourself up in the morning, you have to make sure you've got your food, you'll be living with new people, and you will also be responsible for getting yourself into the classroom, for being at your lecture, for knowing your deadlines, for knowing what needs to be done. So while we do guide you and provide you with lots of support, the responsibility of those things is ultimately on you, and that can be challenging in first year, but we do give students lots of support and to help them through that process, whereas I think that the geographical knowledge itself is not really that difficult. And the other thing is that we give students a lot of opportunity to study things that they're interested in, and that means that if you're interested in a topic, you're more likely to kind of engage with that topic and to get to grips with it, and that also makes it I guess maybe not that difficult. So overall I would say that the program is not difficult as long as you make sure that you attend your lectures and you get your deadlines in, and that you make use of everything that's on offer as a result of your participation in this course.
I hope that answers your question, Jade. I got one here from Siva, and she asks, how big are the classrooms and the classroom sizes? Debbie, do you want to take that one?
Okay, so for geography degree, we normally have a cohort of around about 35 students. So when you come into the first year, we have classroom sizes of where we have 35 people, but we'll break it into little groups. We'll make sure that the students work with different students at different times, so you get a chance in your first year really to meet lots of different people across the your peers, kind of get some chance to meet all of them at some point. And then as you go through the second year and the third year, you're going to start choosing some specialist courses, things that you're particularly interested in, and then they become smaller. So in that case, you might be part on a course that's maybe like 15 people or 12 people, even 10 people. And that's also really nice because obviously you get a lot of attention, you get a lot of individual attention in that, and there's the chance again that sort of it to be focused on the students' particular interests. We do have seminars which might be smaller numbers of students, and we have tutorials as well. You have a chance to have small group sessions and also to have one-to-one sessions.
Great, good question, Siva, thank you. I've got one here from Ali, and Ali asks, how many hours a week will I be in the classroom, and what's a typical week like? You want to take that one now?
Okay, great. So In general, you might be in the classroom 16 hours a week at level 4. I mean, ultimately what we're trying to do is to enable you to become independent learners. And that means that you can engage with material yourself and research issues yourself. Because ultimately what employers want is an independent, somebody who can work independently, come up with ideas and be innovative and take things on board, rather than having your hand held all the time or looking for direction and guidance. So we provide more guidance at level 4, so you have 16 hours in the classroom, and then gradually as you move through level 5 and level 6 you have less time in the classroom because you are doing more independent work. I guess a typical week, in general the university, so usually you do 4 modules each year. You probably have 4 hours of classroom time for each of those modules. And the university tries to make it as commuter friendly for the commuting students, because quite a lot of our students do come from around the London area and they commute to university, and sometimes that can be, can have quite a long commute. So if the timetable can facilitate that you only have to come in maybe 4 days a week rather than 5 days, they generally do that. We can't guarantee that your guys will work for you, but in general they do that. And because there is less class time as we move on, it becomes more feasible at level 6, for example, at level 4. So your typical week might be, let's say you come in on a Monday, you might have a couple of lectures in the morning, then you might have an hour break, or you might have 2 or 3 hours break depending on how the timetable works. But usually what happens in the lectures is we spend time teaching, and then we also spend time on the assessment, what you need to do to meet the requirements of that particular module. You'll be given your assessments, and your lecturer or your tutor or seminar, whoever's delivering the seminar, will give you guidelines and feedback on how you're progressing with that. And then the idea is that you use that extra independent time, the in-between space, to work on your assignment, get books from the library, or maybe attend some clubs and societies, or get engaged in some kind of extracurricular activity. So then you might again have your lecture later in the day, and then usually university finishes at 6 is kind of the end of the day. So it can be broken up, but in general the university tries to block the teaching together so that it might be the case that you have a day where you don't have to come in and you can work on your assignments at home. Yeah.
Okay, Debbie, do you want to take this one? It's a question from Grace about assessments. Are there many exams?
Okay, so there are a few exams, but the majority of the way that students are assessed is not through exams. So it would be through perhaps a report that you're working on, or a piece of research that you're working on. It might be an essay, it might be a group assignment, it might be a presentation, and we deliberately try and give students a lot of different ways, if you like, to be assessed on their learning, because when you get out into the workplace, you're not really out there doing exams, you're out there writing reports, giving presentations, working in a team with groups. So we want students to really engage in a way that is kind of meaningful to them. And I think actually when Mary was answering the question about is it difficult, I think it's not that it's not challenging. It is challenging. Hopefully you will be challenged. You need to be challenged to be interested. But I think what it is that because a lot of it isn't exams, and also because of the class sizes, they're not like massive, so you get a lot of support from the tutors. So you're challenged, but you're also really supported. And I think that's why, in a sense, it's not difficult. It's challenging, but it's not difficult. And one of our students, I really loved this, what they said, because one of our students was at an open day, and she actually answered this question, and she said she'd found A-levels really challenging because A-levels are mostly exams, and she wasn't sure if she was the right person for university. But when she came here, she just blossomed, basically, because the way in which she was assessed really suited her. Like, exams didn't suit her, but doing research reports, doing independent learning, doing group presentations, she absolutely thrived. And in fact, she's now coming back to do an MSc at the university. So she's kind of example where I think the way that we teach is like particularly suits the students that come to our university.
Terrific. I've got a question here from Frankie, who asks, will I be able to have a part-time job? Mary, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. So lots of our students actually have part-time jobs. So you have to obviously look at your timetable and work around that. You do have to fulfill the requirements, obviously, of your modules. You must make sure that you're not working too much. But actually, a really good thing is that there are lots of student jobs on campus. So for example, you could be a student mentor, and we have this mentoring program where the level 5 students, that's the second year students, work with the first year students to maybe coming into the classroom, talking about their experience of doing assignments, giving guidance on assignments, talking about field trips, and that's actually considered a job, and students get paid for that. I think they get €9, something between 9 and €10 an hour, and that's really good because they can work that around their schedule. It also means that they're getting more experience about teaching and about geography, and also it looks great on their CV, so that's really useful. We have other part-time jobs, maybe where students are working as what we call student ambassadors. So if you do come to Kingston on an actual open day, you will see student ambassadors who are around, and they help the attendees, find their way to the room or give out information about whatever they need. So that's also an opportunity that students do. We also have things where we get funding for research projects, and we get our students to conduct some research under our guidance over the course of the year. This year we had a project where we asked students to work on a project where we wanted to investigate the value of the River Thames. So we wanted to think about what is the value, so that we think, well, usually when we talk about value, we think about money, but we also want to think about social value, and as well, maybe the values for health. So going for a walk by the river or having time out, having a conversation with somebody can be very good for our well-being. We wanted students to investigate that topic and to establish how students, we were looking at students, how students could use that river space to think about well-being and how it contributed to them in terms of, at times of university stress, or when we have deadlines and exams if they're coming up or whatever it is. So there are lots of opportunities to work on campus, but of course also lots of our students work in different places around Kingston or around their own local areas. So in generally, I'd say that most of our students have some kind of a part-time job, yes.
Just add to that, which is what I want to say, that I think the thing about Kingston is that we do understand that most of our students have to go out and earn some money, and so we support it obviously in the ways that Mary said, where people are getting experience in research and things that are useful for their career, but also students have got the opportunity to work in the cafes and the restaurants and things, but what we do support students is that they might work more when it's non-assessment time, or they might work more in the holidays, and then if they've got assignments coming up, they can then choose not to do so much of the mentoring or whatever their thing is. So working with the university around part-time work, I think you're working with a kind of employer who really understands about your timetable, your needs. So I think that works really well.
Great, thank you. And a question here from John, who asks, are there social events organised as part of the course? Maybe I'll answer this one. So I think what the geographers are terrific at are creating a community. So it's kind of a great community of learners. And we tend to find that most people doing geography have an inherent love of landscape and physical places and social issues. And so that community really comes together and really comes to the fore, and everyone kind of works very closely together. Indeed, we've got a geography society set up by the students, for the students, that organises a variety of kind of social events around geographical issues. Some of those might be here on campus, so quizzes. We do movie nights, for example, where we kind of take weird and wonderful, funny hazard movies, etc., and take a look at those. There's lots of other volunteering opportunities. So working with our local communities, we can do volunteering on some of our rivers, for example, doing clean-ups, or working on the ecological surveys, working on social projects within the area. And again, it's a social activity. It's a fantastic kind of community of learning activity, but you're also developing that skills portfolio. And you mentioned this point earlier, and it's, university life is not simply the curricula you'll study here at the university through your modules and the field trips and different activities, but it's also developing what we would call the co-curricular, all of those other exciting things that you can do to develop your CV as you move through the course. So, embellishing that with experiences and things you can do to take forward to an employer at the end of it. So yeah, lots of social events organised as part of the course by staff, but also importantly by students, for students, and hopefully coming to Kingston you can get involved with as many of those as your diary allows you. Great. Probably we could take lots more, but maybe we'll end there on the questions for now. I think we probably hit the main ones we wanted to answer. So is there anything you wanted to wrap up with, Mary?
I just want to say, unfortunately, we don't have any of our students here today because they're busy working, because it's not term time. But if you look at our website a little, if you scroll down a little further, you will find a video where our students do talk about the course and what it's like to be a student here. And we also have a link even further down, which is a video of our field trip to South Africa. So if you want to see the kinds of things that our students do, you can have a look at those kinds of things. The other thing I was going to say is that obviously you can email us if you have any questions about the course, and my email address is also on the webpage, m.h.kelly@kingston.ac.uk. You can obviously drop me a line and I'll get back to you with anything that you want to know. Yeah?
Terrific. Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.